So there was this thing that was going on, and we were changing, society was changing, and though I was not conscious of it then, I'm very conscious of it now. I come from this tradition of rural folk, farmers. I'm a descendant and a child of enslaved persons as well as free blacks in this country, and a large part of my identity and who I am directly is related directly to that. To that history, to that ancestry. So, in our household, there was always defined gender roles. And I was raised by a father who did not believe that women should be in the pulpit. I was born and raised Baptist. And was discouraged, actually, from going into to seminary. So, because I was discouraged from going to seminary, I actually found a way to use my voice poetically through the arts, and I use my poetry as social commentary. Social commentary for the life and culture of who we now call African Americans. Now, I say who we now call African Americans because you have to understand the trajectory of what it means to be African American in today's times. First and foremost, African. Next on that is captive. Next to that is either enslaved or free person of color. And next to that, we will go to colored, then Negro, then Afro-American, then Black, and now African-American. So coming from that particular trajectory, ancestrally, that particular heritage, I'm going to see the world in a particular kind of way. And I will have to navigate the world based on what was passed down to me generationally through women in my family, my mitochondrial DNA, as it were, and also how we related to the various men in our families. It goes from body size and body type to the skin color. One of the most interesting things my father said to me when we were walking around the family cemetery, and I said, well, why don't we ever go over to that side of the cemetery? There's Andersons that are buried over there. He said, oh, no, we didn't deal with those Andersons. I said, well, why not? He said, well, they were dark-skinned Anderson. And so I kind of paused, and I was like, for real? Really? It's a cemetery, and y'all buried dark-skinned Andersons over here, and light-skinned Andersons over here. And Anderson ain't even really our name, right? That's the name of the person that owned us. So we were playing the same kind of mind games with each other that we played with us as it relates to skin color. So when I talk about being a woman and seeing the world in a certain kind of way, I don't think any human being actually on the planet can separate themselves from the past. I do believe that the past, it sits there, and it built, we're standing on it, but it built where we are today. Whether we're conscious of it or not is on us. We can know that slavery existed and not let it affect us. We can choose to opt out of the discussions about what it means to be Black, what it means to be female, but it is still very, very present in how we deal with the world and how the world deals with us. So that is the woman piece. When I see myself as an artist, when I use words to express myself, it's a healing thing a lot of times. I do believe that through words, whether they are whispered, whether they are shouted, whether they are said in anger or love, whether they are prayers or whether they are curses, they have energy. And that energy has the power to move and make changes in human beings. And when we do that, we make changes in what happens in society. So the words are urgent, they're necessary, and they're important. When I talk about voice, I'm talking about resistance. I'm talking about the ability or the knowledge of who you are as a person and not letting anyone deter you from saying, this is who who I am. Not being embarrassed about it. This is who I am. These are the people that I come from. And this is across the board. This is not something that is just with Black people. I have encountered a lot of white students who sometimes feel out of place or uncomfortable or ashamed about identifying themselves culturally. It almost seems like it's kind of a private thing. Say, oh, well, I'm Irish or Italian or whatever the case may be. And with me, it's not. It can't be private because I'm wearing the history in the color of my skin. You know, I'm wearing my Africanness. Whenever I look in the mirror, I'm going to see that Africanness, you know. And so I have to basically find ways to defend myself from a lot of the things that have been done and said about Black people, but most importantly, the things that are believed about Black people. And this is where it gets really complicated. The things that we believe, it doesn't matter who you are. There are Black people that believe that Black people are not as good as white people. It's very layered. It is extremely layered and complicated, which is one of the things that I talked about earlier during the lunch hour, is that the word curere, C-U-R-E-R-E, is a word that means curriculum. It's the root of the Latin version of curriculum. And curriculum, it means complicated conversations. Complicated conversations. How do we have complicated conversations that are going to help guide us into this whole notion of the 21st century model for education? This is something that young people that are in college now should be banging at the doors of professors, you know, banging at the doors of the presidents of universities, like, please define 21st century education for me and what it means for me and how I'm going to get a job and pay my bills and, you know, live a quality life with this 21st century model of education. Can we compare this 21st century model to the 20th century, okay, to the 19th, to the 18th, and see how we progressed and where we need to go? We don't have answers. These are some things that we have to discuss and come together on to agree on what these things actually are. But until, you know, someone miraculously puts something together that everybody can understand, each of us has to do our own individual part as far as education is concerned. Each individual needs to be responsible for their getting their education if they're here at Mercyhurst College or wherever they are in college. But beyond that, the goal and the objective of getting that education needs to be discussed, and how reading a book today may be reading something online, or it may be a class that you would attend now may be an online class. Is that better? Is it worse? Or are you indifferent about it? So you have to kind of take charge of who you are and the education process that you're in right now. So when we speak of the theme that I talked about, was treating woman, words, and voice, it really is about self-identity and activism. Cultural identity and activism. Self-knowledge, activism. Respect for yourself and other people, and activism. But activism is even becoming a dirty word these days. You can't say activism without somebody thinking, you know, oh, she's gonna go get dreadlocks. Well, I already got them, so that ain't gonna work. Oh, well, she's getting ready to go be a Black Panther and have a parade and carry a gun. That's what people's image, the popular culture image of what an activist is. An activist is a person who takes an interest in what is happening in their community, whether it's that local community and we want to get our streets paved, or whether get the potholes fixed in the street, or if it's on a more national scale where we're talking about voting rights for African Americans, or whether it's a global issue where we're talking about education in the 21st century, which is a global concern. So we have to begin to take on the activist role and understand what activism is. But you can clean the word up. They say, don't say activist, say advocate. Say advocate. That some kind of way smooths the edge off a little bit. I just don't understand how or why. So, but for now, I'm still an activist. That pretty much sums up the theme of what I'm talking about. And the pieces that I shared with you just a little while ago, the first one was called I Kicked and They Killed. And that one was about me being in my mom's womb when Dr. Martin King Jr. was killed in Memphis, Tennessee. And I had always wanted to write a poem about that experience. But it didn't come to me until I was actually studying another poet, Sonia Sanchez. I was doing a report or some research on her, and I read something about her, and then in a matter of 60 seconds, I jotted down what I've been thinking about all these years. Like, I should write a poem about that. And I've been doing that poem all the time because I want people to understand that my life began the same year that many people believe that the civil rights movement had ended. Some people believe it ended with the assassination or killing of Dr. King, which means that it ended with leadership, the leadership of the civil rights movement. I want to make a comment about the leadership. The leadership model we're used to is, I would say the Dr. King model would have this person like an icon, and everything about civil rights associated with Dr. King, when there were all these other hundreds of thousands of people that were involved in some way, form, or fashion on the local level of organizing and also on the national mass movement of organizing. The leadership model has changed. This is part of the 21st century model. The leadership model is more of a group and shared effort now. It's not when you stick someone at the front and say, you go do this, and everybody else will just sit back, yeah, the leader said, so forth and so on. Everybody has to take a more active role in getting things done. So the model of leadership has changed. And that model of leadership is a part of the 21st century model of education. So we have to begin to understand how that has shifted. Plus, it's kind of discouraging to people who become leaders when you look at what happened to all the leaders in the 1960s. Okay, Dr. King assassinated, Robert F. Kennedy assassinated, John F. Kennedy assassinated, Malcolm X assassinated, Medgar Evers assassinated, and hundreds of thousands of names that we don't know. And so you have to kind of examine society and figure out, these are the things that happen and what are the solutions to the problems that have existed in the past. One of the things is, and I will be quiet and take questions as needed or as people want to ask, one of the things that we really, really need to understand is that the way that race has enters our conversations in this day and time, we don't like talking about it. We cannot stand having conversations about race. We feel that, that was the past, it's done, it's over with, why should we think about it, why should we talk about it? Anybody that complains about race is just, they're playing the victim, they just have all this stuff going on that it's really no big deal. But once again, the layers. You cannot disregard a problem that has existed for hundreds of years by just saying it doesn't exist anymore. With no energy, no effort put in to change the way of thinking that has taken place to cause things to be where they are. So we have a battle, we have a fight that we're in that we don't know we're in. I offer up myself, probably ever since I can remember, even as a child, I've been resistant to stuff, right? But I offer up myself, my energy, and my expertise to helping start conversations where everybody is included and understand that diversity and inclusion is not just about the smaller groups of people on campus among the majority. Diversity and inclusion is about the majority defining itself as well. And to use the word inclusion means that at some point, somebody was excluded. So you have to look at the definition of diversity and inclusion in that way. You're dealing with those who have been historically excluded, marginalized, on the periphery, however you want to call it, pushed away or blocked out or blocked away from the center or the mainstream of life and activity, American culture, American identity. And so it will be interesting to see, even even in the next couple of years, with things where they're going, how many conversations begin to take place on a college, university, college, higher education level, and if there will be some national groups that will take on creating more conversations and dialogues about race, a national discourse, actually. Not just sit together and talk, but writing about it, doing travel, research, all kinds of things, and dealing with race, what it is, what it was, how does it still play itself out, and in society, and then solving some of those issues and problems. Questions? Was that too much? I said, take a deep breath. I'm like,
I've been sitting in lectures for 5 hours a day at school. It's like, yeah, I got this. It was definitely more interesting than my normal lecture. So.
Thank you. Yes.
So I want to ask a question. Well, it's a question that's more so directed to obtaining a response that is like helpful to some of us that are looking to obtain knowledge. Excuse me. So in one's quest to becoming enlightened, as some would like to call it, how did your path start?
The first day, my dad told me that I couldn't do something because I was a girl. Honestly, I do believe that, we call that sexism now. We're celebrating, this month, we're celebrating at Purdue 100-year anniversary of the 1913 March for suffrage. And so we're having a big rally, perform at the rally on Friday and all that. And I have not concentrated on me, the woman, as hard as I've concentrated on me, the black person. For some reason, it just happened that way. And your question is, when did I first notice and
Start your journey to
it was in elementary school. It was in elementary school. And there was some issue where my dad told me you can't do this because you're a girl. And I wrote this little manifesto and stuck it on the wall in the bathroom, and he had to go to the bathroom, right? So I stuck it on the wall, but my mom saw it first, and she's like, girl, what you put this up here for? Your dad's gonna whoop your butt. You don't be doing that. And so I got scared and took it down. But it didn't change the fact that I wrote it. And it started out something like, no girl or woman was put here on earth to serve any boy or man, da 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 da. And that's all I remember about it. Yeah, that's all I remember. And that's how it started. And then somewhere along down the line, I got called, in high school, I got called an N-word by one of my classmates. And that, I didn't know what to do. It's one thing to know that something is wrong. It's another thing to know how to respond to it. Okay? And at that time, I did not know how to respond. So first thing in my mind is get to fight, right? Start fighting. What you want me to? And so people were pushing us apart from each other and all that kind of stuff. And I think from that point forward, I began to be in kind of a fog. I did not begin to come out of that fog until I was a senior at Louisiana Tech University, when I literally was looking for something on the 3rd floor of the library, I believe, and stumbled across a book called Beautiful Also Are the Souls of My Black Sisters. And so I just, had black sisters in it, so I checked it out, And when I checked that book out and started reading it, it was talking about Hatshepsut and Zinga and Makeda, Queen of Sheba, and I was like, wait a minute. And I looked at the title of the book, and I looked at the people it was talking about, so they were black. So the notion of the idea that these women were women of color, period, Never even crossed my mind because it was never taught to me that I should even think in that way. And it's amazing to me how we tend to just snatch Egypt out of Africa as if, you know, it's not sacred. And we can easily say that, you know, oh, well, Egypt was part of, you know, really the part of the Middle East, and, you know, it was a mixture of this, that, and the other. Well, the Nile runs in the opposite direction. Okay, the Nile starts in sub-Saharan Africa and runs up through Egypt, right? And so, what you're saying is that you really want to disconnect those dark-skinned Black Africans from being intelligent enough to be a part of designing pyramids. Mathematical precision that people are still trying to figure out, you know, what was the purpose of to this day. So why is that important for the Black Africans to not be involved with the building of pyramids? That question alone was like, okay, we got a problem here. And then, you know, Mom and Daddy talking about what their parents had to go through in their quest to attain land, get property, provide for their children, make sure they get an education, the same things that every human being wants for their people, their folk. Black folk. So why are we being denied? Why was it so difficult? Why did you have to create separate Black colleges? Why, just because you didn't want Black people to go to, you know, a particular school? It was a problem then. It's a problem now. Even if that problem and everybody else in the world mind is this, you know, it's this microscopic kind of minuscule thing, I see it as an identity issue that I need to work through personally for myself and for my daughter and my nephews and all the little children that I encounter in the neighborhood when I go home, because they are not getting these kinds of conversations at all. And I'm the weirdo in the family. I'm the artsy-fartsy spiritualist, you know. I'm that person in the family. So they say, oh, be quiet, you know, da-da-da. As soon as something happened, well, they had a weird dream and Daddy comes to them with a vision and a dream, they call me. So, you know, whatever. But it started at a young age. I acknowledged it and I kept asking questions. You know, I had to ask the questions and figure out, you know, why am I, and I took it personally, why am I looked upon as being less valuable? Why is my humanity considered to be less valuable than others? Because of the color of my skin, because of my gender, okay? Or because I was like, I'm from people that are poor. You know, why?
Also, I have a question on, you mentioned that today we see the issue of race as something that's new, right? And I think it speaks to the conversation that we've been having, especially since the election of President Obama.
Oh, definitely,
Right?
yes.
So we entered this so-called age of transcending race.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And essentially, I just want to what are your views as it relates to that, in the sense that there's this perception that is permeating society, it's quite pervasive, where conversations like these are more taboo, in the sense of we need to talk about race and some issues in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
That seems more taboo today because we've entered, whether true or not, we don't perceive, right? We've entered this phase of transcending race, and it's evident by the fact that we have Black president. So,
that was quite telling, wasn't it? I will try to get through this without cussing. We have not transcended race in this country because of President Barack Obama. That's period. We are not in a post-racial society because we need to work on being a post-racist society before we will be post-racial. We cannot ignore, erase, say it's okay now, all the trauma that persons of color have gone through in this country and the world, when I'm focusing on the U.S. We can't ignore that and just, try to say, oh, well, it's over now. You don't have to worry about that anymore. No, because those are human things, okay? People were affected psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and they pass that stuff down to their children and their children and their children. Subconsciously, sometimes consciously. And you cannot say that one person's election, experience, whatever you want to call it, as the head of the country, the top person in the country, has changed that. Now, I get into a lot of trouble sometimes because I developed a definition of African American. I broke it down, right? And what people fail to realize is that by my saying that I come from people who were slaves and who were free persons of color, ever since the late 1700s, early 1800s in this country, that is not the same experience that President Barack Obama has. His father was from Kenya. His mother was from Kansas, and she was white. He doesn't have the same kind of racial experience that I have had in this country. And we have to acknowledge those differences. And though he is a black man, an African American, we still have to acknowledge that there's diversity inside of being a black person. And as long as I'm alive, I'm not going to let anyone just push the fact that black folks in this country went through all of that. Oh, it's okay now because we have a black president. That's insulting. That is so insulting. And if we can't understand why it's insulting, we need to have a longer conversation, longer than it's going to take here. Because you have to understand that history. You have to understand how black people, we have been trying to find an identity in this country, believing in the principles, the democratic principles, the democratic basic principles of democracy, so forth and so on. Do we believe in all of that? Okay, yeah, whether we were born here or not, do we believe in all of that? Okay, if you believe in it, then that's where you may want to be, right? But if I'm born into it and I believe in it, but I deny it, we have a problem. We have a problem. And trauma is associated with being black in this country, period. There's trauma associated with being black, period. I don't care if you immigrated to the country, I don't care if you were born here, if you're here. If you want vacation here, it's an issue. And I understand that I may need to turn my cell phone off, right? I understand that. I understand that people would look at me as a rabble-rouser, as keeping up a lot of stuff on race, and just need to be quiet and stop trying to stir up stuff. And the majority of the people saying this are black people. Are black people. I'm sorry if they are not at a place where they are ready to deal with it. I was given certain gifts. I have to use those gifts. And if that is the ability to see things in a certain kind of way, to communicate it, to connect the dots between black folks here and all over the world, if I'm talking about black people, I'm talking about all of humanity. I really am. Not that everybody is black, but I'm saying that. I'm talking about, because if I'm addressing my concerns as a human being with black skin, then I'm concerned, that means I'm concerned for all human beings. If I'm trying to figure myself out and it's a positive thing, then anything that comes from that is going to be a positive thing in how I see other human beings. And we just have to understand that everybody needs to be valued. Everybody needs to be respected. Everybody deserves that right. But as long as we have these, as I said before, these social constructs, these laws, these social rules that were not put on paper that says if you walk down the sidewalk, you need to get off if a white person comes your way and let them pass. You're not supposed to look a white person in the eye. You know, this is stuff that my grandmother and my mother actually had to deal with. My mom's still in Louisiana right now. I can call her right now if I want to. Okay? These are things that, this is not something that is so far gone in history that we shouldn't think about or be concerned about anymore. So, I mean, I would say I'm sorry if people feel that I'm a rebel, but I'm not sorry. You know, I just have to be like, if you're not ready to, you know, to have a conversation, then take your time. You know, take your time. I might be dead and gone by the time they ain't ready, but, you know, take time. But the short answer to your question was,